Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I decided to cover today. Yes, I decided to cover today because centering is something that is very important to me. And one of the things that I discovered in my time in the desert was that when I put on the abaya, I felt a sense of protection. And then I learned why perhaps I was feeling that sense of protection. I remember the university where I was teaching at the time actually hosted a speaker, Dr. Mariam Matar, and she told the story about when it was time for her to cover. And I remember when she told that story how a tear, and I was covered that day as a matter of fact, and how a tear came down out of my eyes because the reason why women choose to cover, or if it's on the other side where they're forced to cover. And I don't even want to get into that debate because, again, who are we as Westerners and non Muslims to tell people what is right for their culture? Now, when I started to cover, 3 years ago, it was because a student had designed an abaya for me. And when I put it on, there was this kinship, and that's where the centering comes from. There was this kinship that was actually bestowed on me um, that I'd never ever felt before, not even in my family, okay, other than when I gave birth to my own children. And when I say kinship, I'm talking about a welcoming um, because I did my little research beforehand because I wanted to make sure that my putting on an abaya and hijab would not be appropriating a culture, and as often happens here in the U.S. and in the West, is that we say that people are appropriating our culture without honoring the culture. And what I found when I asked the question, would you be offended, to various women there, I asked, would you be offended if I wore an abaya and a hijab? And the response was overwhelmingly, no, please do. Now, what I discovered again was a kinship, and so the centering that my soul needed today came by way of this. And also, I am in a school with there's a lot of diversity, and there are some girls that are Muslim. And two of the girls remembered me from the first time that I wore just the hijab. I didn't wear the abaya as well. Um, and they were not just fascinated by it, but they felt honored, okay, just like what I experienced over in the desert. So, centering is very important. And sometimes when we center, let me back up. Centering is very important to us because when you center, you're going into the very depths of your own soul without wondering or being concerned about who's going to be offended. And I know people are like, what do you mean? I mean, you're supposed to care about who's offended. The only time that I am to care about who's offended is if I am over into their territory, if I am somehow violating their personal space. What someone chooses to wear, that is not their personal space, okay? I mean, let me back up. What I choose to wear is not the viewer's personal space. And so I asked myself if perhaps the reason why I need to cover here back home in the States, and I say that like with the quotation marks because this is the place of my birth, but I will tell you this. Because again of that kinship, excuse me, because again of that kinship and that welcoming that I felt, and it wasn't just me feeling it, it was outward, with outward shows of almost like I was a daughter, a lost daughter who came home. That's how it felt, okay? And I was often told to tell the story, to tell people that my name was Fatima, somehow overwhelmingly on sight. That would be my pet name, was Fatima. But that I had been born and raised here in the U.S. and that I was now back and didn't know Arabic. And I was like, well, I can't tell that story. That's not true. However, being covered, again, is a centering thing for me. And I'm not worried about who's offended, because the way that I am is such that if someone is courageous enough to approach me, then I am courageous enough within myself to gently correct them about whatever it is that they choose to say. Because if it is not in a complimentary fashion, then you know that old adage, if you have nothing good to say, keep it to yourself. Or you can talk about it with other people, but what you cannot do is come within a person's personal space. And I think that that's where we are, I guess, with technology, social media, and then being, hidden behind screens. People have that courage, what I call social media syndrome. They have the courage to say things about and to people that they absolutely are out of their lane. And you know what happens in track and field and in many other sports, that when you get out of your lane, you get disqualified. So my answer for that is, you know what? If you are courageous enough to come for me, then be courageous enough to get what comes back to you. Okay, so it'll be some education, and with that education will come that long standing and perpetual understanding that sometimes it's best to mind your own business. As a matter of fact, 100% of the time, it is best to mind your own business when you are stepping out of your lane. So, yes, I decided to cover today, and it's interesting because people assume that because I have on an abaya and a hijab that I'm Muslim. And when I say that I'm not Muslim, they're looking, they're like, well, what's that about? It's like, I just felt like wearing it. I wanted to represent the culture, and not for anybody else, but because of what it does for my soul. I can only explain that to you all, people, is that what it does for my soul, okay, to cover my body, to cover my head. So I guess that's my video for today, because again, I chose to honor my soul. I chose to center. So whatever you do today, find, if you don't already know what it is, and I know you do, everybody knows what it is that brings them to center. Do that today. Do that for yourself. All right? Have a blessed, blessed day.